We have Kane from Synthetix coming up next.
Thanks very much, everyone. Kane here from Synthetix. Apologies, it's a little bit dark. It's about 5:30 in the morning in Sydney, so you'll excuse me if I'm a little bit slow. I've only had a couple of coffees so far, so still spooling up. But I'm going to walk through the recent, I guess, progress that we've made with Synthetix and some of the things that are coming up that are quite exciting. So for those of you who are not aware, Synthetix is a synthetic asset issuance platform on Ethereum. So essentially it allows you to get exposure to various assets like gold, silver. We've got oil coming up. For those of you that have been super excited to trade crude oil recently, based on the volatility of the market. We've also got a number of crypto assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum, etc. So essentially, it's a single platform where you can get exposure to a wide range of assets, real world assets as well as crypto assets. Recent releases. We have a fairly quick release cycle. We have a major release every sort of 4 to 6 weeks. And so in the last few months, one of the major things that we released was an OVM demo with the Optimism team. So the OVM is essentially an optimistic roll-up L2 chain on Ethereum. So we launched a trading competition. It ran for 2 weeks. In that time, we had over 1,000 traders and over 12,000 trades. And particularly given the congestion and some of the issues that we've had on Ethereum, I think the impact of this was quite stark. So trade confirmation times and transaction confirmation times were sub-second. And we were able to update our Oracle, multiple times per second, which was a significant improvement over L1. So this is a major component, I think, and there's a number of dexes that are working on research around L2, both with optimistic rollups as well as ZK snarks and other solutions. And the reality is that in order for us to be able to compete with the centralized platforms, we need to get that layer of kind of latency, improvements implemented. Which for us it's a major goal, and we're hoping to have that over the next kind of 6 to 9 months. So it was a pretty big deal, and in that time we had over $600 million worth of trading volume. Obviously this is all testnet trading volume, but still a lot of trades and a lot of trading volume. So sort of shows the impact of scalability on the platform. In that time, we've also launched equity indices. So we now have an index for the Nikkei and the FTSE. So this is a new asset class, obviously, on top of crypto and commodities that we've launched, which has been quite interesting to sort of see, particularly given some of the constraints around market closures. So one of the interesting things when you bring non-crypto assets onto a platform like Synthetix is that there's market closures, so you need to handle things like, for example, with the Nikkei, there's a 1-hour lunch break, right? And for those of us used to trading Bitcoin 24/7, there's 0 hours of lunch breaks throughout the day. It just runs all the way through. So there's definitely been some interesting kind of aspects of that and how we've had to handle that in the UI. But it certainly, has kind of demonstrated the ability to bring different asset classes onto the network, and we're looking at other equity indices as well as individual equities, so things like synthetic Apple, Tesla, etc. In addition to that, we've recently launched a curve pool. So this is an incentivized auto market maker pool, which has 4 different stablecoins. So SUSD, DAI, USDT, and USDC. And that pool is now sitting at about $12.5 million. So it's the largest and most liquid pool AMM pool on Ethereum today. And we've regularly seen trades in excess of $1 million through that pool with very little slippage. So if you're looking to go from DAI to USDC or USDC to USDT or SUSD, etc., it's probably the most liquid place, and it's integrated into DEX aggregators like 1inch, etc. So it's a super liquid on ramp to go from the major stablecoins into SUSD, and then obviously from SUSD into any one of the other synthetic assets that we support. Another big change that's happened earlier this year in Feb, was the implementation of fee reclamation. So last year, again, for those of you who've been following the project, you're probably aware that there were a number of issues around oracle latency and front running. And so we've implemented a kind of customized solution to handle the front running issues that we've seen. And this has had obviously a major impact on the protocol, generally around a number of areas. But the upside is that it's reduced the impact of front running on the oracle to essentially zero. So it's opened the door for leverage and a number of other assets that we've been holding off, waiting to implement. So it's a pretty big deal in terms of the the kind of future implementations of new products and new assets on the platform. One impact it did have was on volume, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. We were doing at times $5 to $10 million a day in volume, and that volume has dropped off significantly with the reduction of front running. But we're now seeing much more organic trading. So again, I'll talk a little bit later about the kind of KPIs and metrics that we're tracking. So some of the upcoming launches, I mentioned earlier, synthetic oil. So we have an index that's going to be tracking WTI, so West Texas Intermediate crude oil. And this is something that a lot of people in the community, both the Synthetix community and the broader community, have been very interested in lately, obviously due to volatility and a number of things. So we're pretty excited about this. It's another commodity index, and it's the first time that we've taken a futures index and constructed sort of a spot price out of it. So that should be launching in the next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully. It's taken a little bit of time to kind of get that index right, but we're pretty comfortable that we're in a place where the launch is coming up pretty soon. And that's been supported by Chainlink and some of our market making partners with access to CME and some of that futures data. So pretty exciting launch. So definitely look out for that. We also are about to this week, in fact, today's Tuesday, so today's Wednesday here in Australia. So in a couple of days, about to launch liquidations. The Synthetix platform has always had a fairly high collateralization ratio. So if you're used to seeing lending platforms and other platforms like Maker, Compound, Aave, you're probably used to seeing collateralization requirements of around 150%. In Synthetix, it's ranged from 500% to 800% over the last couple of years. And the reason for that is to essentially provide a very large buffer to avoid liquidation. But this week we'll be implementing liquidation, which will open the door for lower collateralization ratios and a much larger synth pool. So that's something that we're going to be working on. At the moment, there's around about $20 million worth of synths outstanding, but we're hoping to get that up to about 50 million, as we get closer to the end of the year, which will require lower collateralization ratios. We're also introducing something, as we roll out these new assets, so commodities and other forex and equities, differential fees. So the current fees on the platform are 30 basis points. The challenge with that, obviously, is that things like equities, you might be used to trading on Robinhood with 0 fees. And so a 30 basis point fee can be quite a deterrent to trading. And so differential fees will allow us to essentially, lower fees to essentially 5 bips, 2 bips, a couple of basis points, very low fees on FX and commodities and some of these other assets, while retaining higher fees for, less liquid markets like crypto. Another launch that's coming up in the next few weeks is binary options. So binary options are essentially a way to take a position based on a specific outcome. So for example, we will have binary options on things like, will Bitcoin be over 10K? Which last night was looking better than it is this morning. On the 31st of December of 2020. And so people will be able to take a position on either side of that market and decide whether they think that the Bitcoin over the long term will be over 10K or under 10K. And these are interesting markets because they're the first sort of permissionless market that we're enabling on Synthetix. So anyone will be able to come and turn up and seed with some funding a binary options market and pick the specific variables that they want. So they can pick whichever asset they want. One market that we expect to get a little bit of traction with is the link market. So we support the link token. So we're expecting to see some link markets. I think link over 1,000 should be an interesting market, by the end of the year. We're also launching synthetic futures. So at the moment, the platform supports essentially a spot market. So you can take a position in spot Bitcoin or spot gold, etc. What we're looking to do is launch synthetic futures that will have leverage and some of the other improvements that you get out of a perpetual future market, such as funding rates, etc. And so this is coming up in the next 2 or 3 months, and is going to be a significant improvement over the current platform in that you'll be able to take a leveraged long position on gold, for example. So things like Forex and gold, typically people expect to have some level of leverage to be able to trade them, and this will introduce that ability and should significantly increase the trading volumes on the platform. Final component of that transition to synthetic futures and binary options is migrating to Chainlink. So we're about 50% migrated to Chainlink right now, but we'll be transitioning the rest of the assets to the Chainlink network and deprecating our existing centralized Oracle, which is a big deal for the project because it's one of the major components that we need to lock in order for us to fully decentralize the platform and move governance away from a core team. So a couple of system updates. So as I mentioned, since we launched Akenar, the update in February, which had fee reclamation included, we've seen over $75 million in trading volume. So while trading volume has dropped off from its peak in 2019, we're still seeing significant trading volume, and we expect that to increase even more so over the next few months as we add some of these new assets and trading options. So I'll talk a little bit about governance, because our transition to decentralized governance is a big component of what we're focused on right now. We have a very vibrant community and over 5,000 participants in our Discord community. So we have regular polls within Discord that allow us to kind of take a temperature check of some of the changes that we're making. So we use a form of rough consensus, which is fed through our Synthetix improvement proposal pipeline. So since we launched that last year, we've had 61 SIPs launched, and this is open to anyone. So anyone within the community can show up. They can submit an SIP and say, for example, I believe that this calculation that the system is making is incorrect, or could be improved, or I believe that this particular asset should be added. This essentially any protocol improvement that someone wants to suggest can be processed through this SIP pathway, and then from that, once it's been submitted, the community will review it, will debate it, and then it will be moved into an implemented status if the community approves it. So, this is something that that we're really proud of, the level of engagement that we have with the community. And while we haven't moved to direct on-chain voting or token voting, we believe that the consensus that we reach in the community and the kind of rigor around the debates that happen are significantly better because of that, because the level of participation is much higher. So we want to talk a little bit about the Treasury and funding, and just I guess an update on sort of the overall position of the project. So we've been operating since mid 2017. We did a token sale in early 2018, and one of the components that we've looked to implement over the last 6 months has been this transition to public goods funding. So we launched a grants DAO. We've paid out so far $250,000 worth of grants through this grants DAO, and we've committed a further million SNX a year, so around $800,000 per year for the next 3 years to fund that. And then in addition to that, we have the Synthetix DAO, which is the treasury of the project, which funds kind of direct contributors and project teams that are working on a number of different aspects of the project. And at the current burn rate that we have, we've got more than 3 years of runway. It's probably close to 5 years at the moment, but pretty comfortably 3 years of runway. So we're in a very good position to execute on both the short-term goals and the long-term goals of the project. And we expect that as we kind of grow and add additional contributors, that this kind of wider access to the funding from the Synthetix DAO will be a critical component of that. So as we add new members and other contributors to the project into this DAO, that will manage the treasury. So yeah, that's me. That's the latest on Synthetix. And yeah, I guess we'll jump into some questions.
Awesome presentation, Kane. I guess to start it off here, we got one in the chat. So where have you seen the most demand on Synthetix Exchange, I'm guessing? Like any asset class in particular, or anything interesting for you going forward?
Yeah, I still think we're seeing a lot of interest in the large cap crypto assets, right? So BTC, ETH. I think Link is probably the third highest in terms of trading volume. That said, we recently launched a pool for gold on Uniswap V2. So we now have I think it's about $1.2 million worth of liquidity on gold, which we think will be really interesting because it'll allow people to kind of jump straight into gold from, say, USDC or other stable coins.
Mm-hmm. And on the perpetual swaps, did I hear that you're doing a perp for gold?
Yeah, we will. So essentially, any of the assets that are on the platform, there'll be perps for so WTI, gold, silver, Bitcoin, ETH, everything.
So if I can 20x gold, what's the point of Bitcoin?
I'll let someone else rage against you there. But yeah, it's I think ultimately there's an argument for price exposure, right, versus physical custody. So if you desperately want to hold physical gold in a vault in Switzerland, then that's your choice. If you just want price exposure to it, then you're gonna have some new options over the next few months.
Awesome.